Right. So thank you so much. So today, Chiara and I is going to talk to you about the constructive feedback in statistical programming setting. So we are both statistical programmers working at MSD. We work in health technology assessment. And our team is split into the 3 different offices. So we do have an office in London and Brussels, and we also have a brand new office in Zurich. So it's really lovely to be here and show our presentation to you. So let's move on to the agenda for today. So this presentation is going to be split into different sections. So first of all, we'll define feedback and talk a bit about the mindset. Then we'll move on to the constructive feedback, and I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on how to provide it. Then Chiara is going to take over, and she's going to talk to you about what is not considered to be a constructive feedback. And we are also going to draw some conclusions in the end. So let us begin with the definition of the feedback. So feedback is an essential component of effective change, and it applies to every aspect of our life. The term feedback is used to describe helpful information or criticism about prior action or behavior from an individual communicated to another individual or a group of people who can use that information to adjust and improve current and future actions and behaviors. At work, feedback is a dynamic communication process between 2 individuals when there's a change of information regarding the performance of who is receiving the feedback. It is important to give effective feedback, but also the person who is receiving the feedback, as well as the person who is giving the feedback, needs to have a prepared mindset for it, ready to receive the feedback accurately and to obtain some benefit from it. So in this slide, you can see that there are 2 different types of mindset. So we have the growth mindset, and we also have a fixed mindset. So the fixed mindset is very reluctant to change. So we can associate things such as failure is the limit of my abilities, or I stick to what I know. On the other hand, you have the growth mindset, which is very open to feedback, is open to change, and to opportunities to grow. So with the growth mindset, you can associate things like failure is an opportunity to grow, and I do like to try new things. So it is really the growth mindset that we are looking for in both in the person who is giving and who is receiving the feedback. There are also some other qualities we are looking for in the person who is giving the feedback. So first of all is credibility. So who gives the feedback must have technical skills required to give an accurate evaluation. There has to be an element of trust. So trust is essential, that the issuer has established a relationship of trust with the individual he's giving the feedback to. And it is very good if the person who is giving the feedback is authoritative. Right, let's move on now to the constructive feedback. So constructive feedback is a strong tool that clarifies expectations, helps people learn from their mistakes, and builds on confidence. Constructive feedback should contain an evaluation component to clarify the difference between the performance level achieved and the goal set. And it also should have an informative component that contains additional indications regarding the teams, the errors done, and also it should give some solutions. There are also some other qualities we look for when we are providing the feedback. So feedback should contain specific examples rather than generalizations. It should be factual and clear. It should be unbiased. Feedback should be given as soon as possible, right after the completing of the task. Feedback should be usable. It is good if the feedback is desired by the receiver, and probably most of important, feedback should be checked for understanding, so that the person who receives the feedback takes the most out of it. So now we can see why it is so important to give a constructive feedback, and how the constructive feedback is very vital to employees' ongoing development. Right, so now that we know a bit about the constructive feedback, I will share with you some tips and tricks on how to provide an effective feedback. So first of all, the first tip and trick is an analysis, environment, pattern, and action. So this is also referred to as a feedback loop, and it is divided into 4 different steps. So first of all, we have analysis when we study the data related to the behavior in question. The next step will be to think about an environment that connects the behavior to the person and to the environment. Then we can draw a pattern that we would like to follow. And we also want to end up and get some action so that the person can change and renew themselves to an action or choice. And this action is the basement of the feedback loop. Let us go to an example in here. So first of all, let's think about analysis. So the director of statistical programming noticed a missed target for completing mandatory training on time. The environment for this would be that the statistical programming team seems to be more focused on working assignments, giving less priority to training. We can draw a pattern. So the director decides to encourage team to complete the training within a week of them being assigned. And the action is after the director sends the reminder to the team, the training compliance has been achieved. So you can see here, this is a nice example how we can apply the feedback loop. The next tip and trick is the corrective feedback. So corrective feedback directly relates to the assignment and the outcome of the assignment. And it is most productive, it applies to situations inherent in misinterpretation of the information rather than the lack of information in the first place. And corrective feedback allows incorrect assumptions to be discarded and provides indications of the correct strategic and research direction. So let's have a look at an example in statistical programming setting. Chiara, I can see you missed a few steps when developer testing of hazard ratio calculation macro. I think the reason could be that you followed the old version of an SOP. Do you think this is the case? I suggest you read the new SOP carefully, and if you have any questions, we can discuss it together in the following meeting. So in here, you can have a look at the tone and the word we have used, the line manager used for Chiara in order to correct her actions. The next tip and trick is the feedback sandwich. So it includes the critical feedback along with the other positive feedback, such as in a sandwich. So it is a more balanced approach. The criticism will really only be quite a small part of the assessment. So it will reduce the anxiety and the discomfort of the person who is receiving the feedback. The feedback sandwich is based on the praise, improve, praise model. So we want to start off with some good things, so we are focusing on strengths. In the middle, we want to sandwich in a bit of the criticism, which will be usually the areas that are in need of improvement. And we also want to finish off on a positive note. So in the end, we want to reiterate the positive results that can be expected if the criticism is acted upon. So let's have a look at an example here. So first of all, we want to start on a good, positive note. So we say, Tom, you did exceptionally well last year, in particular with regards to your practical, technical skills and self-development. Now we want to move on to a bit of criticism, so maybe the areas we would like Tom to work on. So next year, it will be good to focus more on team working skills. In the last few projects, I noticed that you avoided collaborating with other statistical programmers and preferred to work independently, keeping the tasks to yourself and working extra hours. And then, of course, we want to finish off on the positive note. So we would say, while your dedication to the project is much appreciated, you will notice the benefits of splitting the workload, and I will help you in this. So most advice about giving feedback focuses on what we say, on the words we use. However, our nonverbal communication is just as important as the words. And the body language is the process of communicating through nonverbal signals. So if you convey a discomfort or aggression of your body language, it could make the recipient feel unsafe and therefore prevent them from listening or acting on their own input. So it is we should do our best to have a positive, open, and supportive tone. We should make and maintain eye contact to create a feeling of connection. Of course, we shouldn't stare at someone, but keeping an eye contact is always a good thing. We shouldn't cross our arms when talking to someone, and we should make sure that our posture doesn't communicate dominance. Also, it is nice to smile when appropriate to project the warmth and the goodwill. And it is nice also to nod to show that we are listening, that we are paying attention to the other person. And the last different trick I would like to share with you today is, of course, the more details, the better. So those who provide feedback must be attentive to the details, and there's no need to leave any room for incorrect interpretations or misunderstandings. It is an action-centered feedback with accurate information, so please give as much detail as possible. When giving the feedback, you can think of some help questions. For example, what happened? When and where it had happened? Who has done that? And what impact it had on other people? Now, we'll go to the last example in here. So first of all, we have a look at the more generic feedback. So Ligia, you have done a really good job of meeting the timelines for the latest submission. Can you please make sure to pay more attention to the compliance and quality of the output in future? So you can see this feedback is quite generic. It doesn't specify which output we are talking about, what compliance issues are there. How to improve this feedback? Of course, by giving more details. So we can rephrase the feedback by saying, Ligia, you have done a really good job of the latest submission. In the future, can you please make sure to pay more attention to the program log files and make sure that they are clean? For example, they do not contain a warning or error messages, and that all titles and footnotes in your tables are coded up according to the specifications. So you can see that by giving a bit more details, Ligia is able to actually correct and improve herself. So now I'm going to hand over to Chiara, who is going to talk to you about what is not considered to be a constructive feedback.
Thank you very much, Ligia. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So now let's talk about what is not a constructive feedback indeed. As we have already noticed previously from Ligia, it is not a constructive feedback, a generic feedback. Why? A generic feedback could appear obscure to the recipient by reducing the degree of learning. If a colleague doesn't have a clear understanding of what they are doing wrong, how can they be expected to fix it, right? So imagine to receive the following feedbacks. The layout of the output doesn't match the specifications. You need to be more compliant. As you can see, it is not clear, for example, which output we are referring to, what exactly is not matching. We need more details. Destructive feedback is not a constructive feedback. Instead of telling employees what is great about their work and where they went wrong, destructive feedback points out faults and directly attacks the individual. Destructive feedback is not giving practical advice or supportive feedback. It could hurt people's feelings. It doesn't provide any evidence to support the assessments. Employees exit such conversations feeling defeated without necessarily even knowing what they have done wrong or how they could do better next time, simply because that information isn't shared. Example could be this survival analysis is for sure not correct, or you are not managing the team in an efficient way. Praise and critics are not constructive feedback if they are not managed correctly, because if not handled properly, can produce effects opposite to the reason that generated them. Critics can frustrate and demoralize the recipient. Praise does not allow the recipient to understand the reasons for their success. Not contextualizing praise and critics generates an increase in levels of stress and lack of understanding of the feedback process in the recipient. Let's have a look to examples of critics. You have to find a solution. You can't go on like this. How did you come up with a similar idea? Example of praise. You were great. Keep it up. Great job. I hope there are other occasions like that. And now, what is the parent effect? The parent effect is the reluctance and failure to effectively share negative information. The name parent effect is suggesting some similarity with the behavior of a parent with his/her baby. It can manifest in three different ways. The first one, release of information process by making negative feedback as positive as possible. The second one, use of courtesy to increase support and emotional closeness to the recipient. And the third one, the omission of all or part of the information. The recipient, based on feedback more or less distant from the original one, will not be able to regulate the behavior at best. Let's have a look at an example. John and Michael are statistical programmers, and they have to work together on a project, and the manager says to John, I noticed there was not a lot of communication between Michael and you. It is fine, but please, if you can, try to communicate a bit more with him. It will help you both to work better. In this case, the feedback is made as positive as possible. In the second one, the courtesy is used. I know it is hard to work with Michael sometimes, but please, could you try to have better communication with him? Now, how should be constructive feedback? It could be like, whenever I see you and Michael together, it seems like you don't get along. I notice you interrupt him quite regularly and often shut down his ideas. It seems as if you rather work on your own than with him. That creates an uncomfortable atmosphere in the office, as well as making Michael reluctant to work on the project. I feel like the project is suffering because you are working against him rather than with him. How do you feel about what I've just said? We could have a couple of mediation sessions with you and Michael to resolve your differences. So this could be a good example. So summarizing, the aims of constructive feedback are empower and guarantee the professional growth of the collaborators. Define and communicate what is expected from employees in terms of goals, results, and behaviors. Promote the development of a management culture based on goals and results. Positively impact an individual's behavior. Provide a new perspective and give valuable insight into the person receiving feedback. Thank you very much. And now let us check if there are questions.
Thanks a lot, Ligia and Chiara, for your presentation. And yeah, please let us know if you have any questions. I'll start with the first one right away. Are there special intercultural aspects to be considered when giving feedback? For example, I know that some cultures have the habit to start with a praise and finish with criticism, while others start with criticism and finish with the praise.
Well, I would say that it is good to probably try to follow the suggestions that we have just done and use the praise and criticism in the correct way, and maybe try to create a constructive feedback and really pay attention to the praise and critics. Ligia, do you want to add something?
Yes. So of course, most of our team are multicultural. So most of our work with our colleagues across the many cultures, many countries, and I think it is always quite good to actually learn about other habits, about how other cultures interact with each other, and how do they actually communicate and give the feedback. I don't think that there is any habit as you are asking, Holder. I think it very much depends on the person who is providing the feedback, and also knowing the person who is receiving the feedback as well. So I think it's as long as the feedback is constructive and open, then I think that's the way to go.
Yes, and I'm also thinking that.
Go ahead.
I'm also thinking that it is really important, the mindset. So the management should prepare a bit the receiver to receive the feedback, and so when they prepare to receive the feedback, actually they should also count about all the characteristics of this person. I think there are other questions.
Are there any more? I mean, I was also wondering, how do you decide which technique to use on whom? And with the sandwich technique, isn't there also a risk that the receiver only hears the positive side and overhears the negative part or the criticism in between? That's
a very good point. I think it all depends on the person. It all depends on the situation you are in as well. For the feedback sandwich, probably the most common use of that I have seen was for the annual appraisals of a person. So you all often start off on a very positive tone, and then if you want to sandwich in a bit of a criticism, then, well, of course, you shouldn't probably focus just on the areas of improvement, but of course, one of the other things that you should bear in mind is to always check your feedback for understanding. So you should make sure that the feedback is getting through to the person you're chatting with. You can always ask what do you think about it? How do you feel about the things I have just said? So that you can make sure that not just the positive and not just the negatives are going to be picked up by the other person.
You already mentioned the receiver before, and is there also some special input for potential receivers to, for example, step back and don't take everything personal? How would you approach that?
Yeah, that's another very good question here. So, well, of course, in our teams we are dealing with many different personalities. There might be some people who will take things very personal. There might be quite emotional when giving or receiving the feedback. They might be quite sensitive as well to what we say, to the actions, to our body language. So always the person who is giving the feedback has to be very mindful about the other person, how they feel and like how they can react. If you are going to give some feedback that might create some kind of emotions, you might think about maybe preparing the person for receiving the feedback. So maybe you can say, okay, maybe we can schedule some time just to chat about this, and we can mention what we want to chat about, so that the person is mentally prepared that there's going to be a talk about it, not just catching pace by surprise, and the other person is not prepared for the talk. And you always have to bear in mind the other person's feelings. So just use the words carefully and just be mindful about your body language, the non-verbal cues as well.
That relates very nicely to a question that just came in. Technical people are very straightforward, and sometimes written communication seems harsh. How to deal with that?
Yes, that's another very, very good one. That's another good one. I have seen many emails like maybe in all capital letters, and so it's you always have to think very carefully whenever you speak or write. And it is also, we didn't cover this in our presentation here, but there's also many different channels you can choose when you want to give the feedback. So this is not just a verbal feedback, you can also give written feedback. So you always have to choose the channel that is most appropriate to what you want to say. So of course, if you want to say something which might involve some critics, some emotions, then of course maybe you want to choose the channel that is more face-to-face. Of course, now we can't really meet face-to-face in our offices, or we are quite restricted because of the pandemic. So maybe we can choose a channel with the to communicate via the WebEx, or having a webcam on, so that we can also see the other person, so we can maintain some kind of contact, and we can see the reactions that our words are going to create in another person. For the written feedback, also, so of course we shouldn't use the capital letters if we can avoid those, and we also have to be very careful about the tone that we are speaking to with the other person. Of course, I do appreciate that as being programmers, some people might think that we are not having such great social skills. But I think that all of us can work on that, and of course, working across different cultures as well doesn't help. So yeah, just a general advice will be just be very, very mindful about other cultures, about other people, and think twice before sending anything in writing. Just maybe read it a couple of times and think how you would feel if you have received feedback like this.
Yeah, I think that we should think or have in mind that give feedback, it is not just that we are talking with our colleague. No, it is more. So we should really develop a bit more our personal skills about this, and every time think before to give us feedback and give it in the best way. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.